What if the rain falling outside your window wasn't really rain at all? Imagine looking up at the sky, feeling droplets touch the ground, and realizing they are heavier than water, shimmering like liquid metal. That is exactly what millions of people across the world began reporting on the 12th of March 2026. From London to Tokyo, and now moving toward the Pacific Northwest, witnesses are describing a strange precipitation unlike anything ever recorded. The droplets carry a metallic silver sheen, and even more puzzling, radar systems are detecting them as solid particles rather than liquid water. For someone who has spent 4 decades studying theoretical physics, this is not the kind of phenomenon anyone expects to see inside Earth's own atmosphere. Yet here we are, staring directly at the data. At 4 UTC this morning, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration quietly issued an advisory to aviation pilots. The warning asked aircraft to avoid cumulonimbus cloud systems above 30,000 feet. The reason was simple, but deeply unsettling. Doppler radar readings were not showing the familiar patterns of water droplets. Instead, they were detecting dense particulate matter suspended inside the clouds. That alone would already be unusual, but when the measurements were compared with observations from space agencies, the situation became far more alarming. The conclusion forming inside research centers around the world was surprisingly clear. This event was connected to the mysterious interstellar object known as 3I Atlas. Just 6 hours earlier, NASA's Deep Space Network confirmed a statistical correlation so unlikely that scientists could barely believe it. The probability that it happened by coincidence was calculated at less than 1 in 5 billion. At the exact moment, 3I Atlas reached its closest interaction point with Earth's magnetic field lines, the object released an extremely dense stream of particles traveling at enormous speed. These were not ordinary fragments of ice or dust like those typically ejected from comets. Instead, the data suggests a deliberate injection of material directly into Earth's orbital path. Picture standing in Central Park during a light drizzle. The droplets land on the pavement, yet they do not immediately soak into the ground. Instead, they remain there, glimmering like tiny beads of mercury. That is precisely what people are describing right now in cities around the world. The physical properties of these droplets are even more puzzling. Their specific gravity is measured at roughly 3.4 times heavier than normal water. According to standard atmospheric physics, particles that heavy should fall rapidly through the atmosphere. They should never remain suspended inside clouds. But these particles did exactly that. They hovered. They lingered. And only now are they beginning to fall. When scientists mapped the timing of this rainfall against the moment of the Atlas flare in space, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The synchronization is so precise that the scientific community is now treating the situation as an emergency. The real question is no longer simply what is happening. The real question is why it is happening now. To understand the urgency, we need to examine the mechanism behind it. Comets normally release material in chaotic bursts as sunlight heats their surface. Dust spreads out over millions of kilometers and drifts randomly through space. What happened here looks nothing like that. This event appears precise, controlled, almost surgical. To see why, we have to go back exactly 48 hours. On the 8th of March 2026, at precisely 14:22 UTC, NASA's Goldstone Solar System radar facility in California was tracking 3I Atlas as it passed through the inner solar system. The telemetry looked completely normal. Its trajectory followed every prediction scientists had calculated. Then, within a brief window lasting only 18 seconds, the radar data suddenly exploded off the charts. Goldstone recorded a massive spike in radar cross-section. The object did not break apart. It did not fragment. Instead, something far stranger occurred. The surface area of the object appeared to expand by nearly 400% before contracting again. During that brief expansion, a concentrated plume of material was ejected directly toward the intersection point of Earth's orbit. The measured ejection velocity was 3.2 kilometers per second. That is faster than a rifle bullet. In physics, this kind of motion is known as a directed impulse, a burst of energy that pushes matter in a specific direction with extraordinary force. Nature rarely produces impulses like this unless a massive collision has taken place. But in this case, there was no collision at all. And that realization is where the mystery truly begins. The moment the radar spike appeared, something equally strange was happening elsewhere in the solar system. At that exact second, 14:22 UTC, The European Space Agency's Gaia spacecraft registered an unusual photometric signal. Gaia, which maps billions of stars with extreme precision, detected a flash coming from the direction of 3I Atlas, but this flash was not the hot burst of light normally associated with explosions. Instead, it was a cold reflection with extremely high albedo, as if a highly reflective surface had suddenly been exposed to sunlight. While NASA recorded the pulse through radar, ESA captured the optical flash, and then a third confirmation arrived from an entirely different observation method. Japan's space agency, JAXA, was monitoring the object using the Subaru telescope on Mount Mauna Kea. Their infrared sensors detected a brief but powerful heat signature associated with the plume that had just been ejected. 3 independent agencies, 3 different measurement systems, radar, optical photometry, and infrared detection, all pointing to the same astonishing conclusion. At that moment, 3I Atlas fired something toward Earth. To appreciate how extraordinary this is, consider how comets normally behave. When solar radiation heats their surface, frozen gases expand and blow dust outward into space. The result is a broad, messy tail that spreads across enormous distances. Solar wind then pushes this material away from the sun, stretching it into a diffuse stream. But the stream detected from Atlas did not behave that way at all. Instead of dispersing, the particles remained tightly concentrated. According to calculations from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the material traveled approximately 40 million kilometers while maintaining an extremely narrow beam. By the time it reached Earth's upper atmosphere, it entered at a precise angle of 12.4 degrees. That number may sound trivial, but in atmospheric physics it is critical. At exactly that angle, particles can skim the outer layers of the atmosphere without burning up. They slow down gradually, cool, and settle into the cloud layers instead of disintegrating like meteors. If the entry angle had been just 1 degree steeper, the entire plume would have vaporized. If it had been 1 degree shallower, the particles would have skipped off the atmosphere and continued back into space. In other words, the margin of error was incredibly small. Hitting that exact entry corridor from 40 million kilometers away requires a level of navigational precision that is almost unimaginable. It would be like throwing a dart from New York and hitting the center of a target in Tokyo while both cities are moving. The total estimated mass of this payload is around 44,000 metric tons. That is roughly the weight of a large aircraft carrier. Now imagine that enormous mass pulverized into microscopic reflective spheres and delivered directly into Earth's stratosphere. When scientists began modeling the event, one idea immediately came to mind: panspermia. This is the hypothesis that life can spread between stars through meteorites and cosmic debris. But panspermia is believed to occur slowly and randomly over millions of years. What we are seeing here unfolded in less than 48 hours. The silver rain now falling across parts of the world appears to be the result of that beam entering the atmosphere. As the particles slowed down, they mixed with water vapor and eventually began falling as precipitation. But the truly unsettling discovery came when researchers studied the composition of the plume before it reached Earth. Spectral analysis from the Subaru telescope revealed a repeating ultraviolet signature embedded within the material. It was not consistent with silicates, ice, or any other common cometary substance. Instead, it suggested the presence of a complex metallic alloy. This is the detail that has many astrophysicists losing sleep tonight. The spectral lines indicate elements arranged in patterns that do not naturally form in the cold vacuum of space. In simple terms, the data hints at advanced metallurgy. If that interpretation is correct, then 3I Atlas did not simply pass through our solar system. It interacted with Earth deliberately, and that raises a question far more important than trajectory calculations. What exactly did it send us? Because when those silver droplets finally reach the ground, when they settle into soil, oceans, and living ecosystems, the consequences may extend far beyond a strange weather event. The next stage of the mystery began when the rain itself was finally examined. Early samples were collected in London's Hyde Park at approximately 5:30 UTC. People across the city had already noticed something unusual. Umbrellas were turning a dull metallic gray after being exposed to the rain. Parked cars were coated in a thin, shimmering layer that looked almost like powdered chrome. When scientists at Imperial College London placed a drop of the rainwater under an electron microscope, what they saw immediately caught their attention. There was no sign of organic debris, no pollen, no soot, and none of the contaminants typically found in urban rainfall. Instead, the liquid contained perfectly shaped microscopic spheres. Each sphere was identical. In nature, particles almost never look like this. Dust grains are jagged, pollen grains vary in size and shape, even raindrops themselves are irregular, but these objects were uniform down to the nanometer scale. Every sphere measured exactly 500 nanometers in diameter. That level of consistency strongly suggests manufacturing rather than natural formation. Physicists sometimes refer to materials like this as smart dust. The phrase does not mean tiny machines flying through the air. Instead, it describes particles with unusual physical properties that allow them to behave in coordinated ways. Chemical analysis revealed an even more surprising composition. The spheres contained a metallic alloy, made primarily of iridium and osmium, two extremely dense elements rarely found together in such quantities. But the most troubling discovery was the presence of technetium-99. Technetium does not occur naturally on Earth in stable form. It is typically created during nuclear reactions. The isotope detected in the samples has a half-life of roughly 200,000 years. Finding it embedded inside microscopic spheres falling from the sky raises serious questions about how the material was produced. When researchers at the University of Tokyo examined the elemental ratios more closely, they discovered another strange detail. The proportion of iridium to osmium was exactly 1.618. That number may seem familiar. It is known as the golden ratio, a mathematical constant that appears frequently in natural patterns such as spiral galaxies, shells, and plant structures. However, it does not normally appear in industrial alloys. The idea that heavy metals would assemble themselves into such a precise ratio by chance is extremely unlikely. If someone wanted to send a clear, universal signal across interstellar distances, mathematics would be the obvious choice. Radio waves fade and scatter across space. But matter, especially heavy, stable matter, can carry information far more reliably. This possibility becomes even more intriguing when we look at how the material behaves after the water evaporates. In a laboratory test conducted at MIT only hours ago, scientists placed a droplet of the silver rain onto a silicon wafer. As the water slowly dried, the microscopic spheres did not scatter randomly across the surface. Instead, they began pulling themselves together. Within minutes, they arranged themselves into a perfectly ordered hexagonal lattice. This behavior is not typical chemistry. It resembles nanotechnology. The particles appear capable of organizing themselves using the surface tension created during evaporation. As they move, they form conductive patterns across the surface. Now imagine that process happening not inside a laboratory, but across an entire planet. Millions of tons of this material are currently falling into oceans, rivers, soil, and reservoirs. If the particles continue assembling themselves wherever water evaporates, they could eventually create enormous networks of interconnected structures. Scientists are beginning to ask difficult questions. Could this be forming a sensor system across the Earth's surface? Could it be preparing the environment for some unknown process? Meanwhile, footage emerging from New York City shows another unusual effect. Puddles formed by the silver rain do not reflect light like normal water. Instead, they shine like mirrors. The liquid is so slippery that pedestrians report sidewalks feeling almost frictionless. These particles are also extremely dense. Once they sink into the ocean, they are unlikely to degrade or corrode. Iridium and osmium are among the most chemically stable elements known. But perhaps the most disturbing property was discovered when geophysicists examined the particles' magnetic behavior. They are not permanently magnetic. Instead, they are superparamagnetic, meaning they become magnetic only when exposed to an external magnetic field. And Earth happens to have one. As these particles fall through the atmosphere, they naturally align themselves with Earth's magnetic field lines. In effect, we may be coating the entire surface of our planet with an incredibly thin layer of responsive magnetic material. Early satellite measurements already show a measurable fluctuation, about 0.4% in magnetic field strength, over regions where the heaviest rainfall occurred. Something is changing. The real question now is whether this material was designed to build something. For many researchers, everything we have discussed so far would already be enough to trigger alarm. A precisely aimed particle beam from deep space, 44,000 tons of microscopic metallic spheres entering Earth's atmosphere, self-assembling structures forming spontaneously in laboratory tests. Any one of these events would be extraordinary on its own. But at 8:15 UTC this morning, the situation changed in a way that turned a scientific puzzle into a global security concern. The rain began producing a signal. That statement might sound unbelievable, but the measurements are very real. Scientists operating the successor facility to the famous Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico were running atmospheric calibration tests when their instruments detected something unexpected. A faint but coherent electromagnetic hum was coming not from space, but from the ground itself. Water collecting in reservoirs, drainage systems, and city streets was emitting a low-frequency signal. The frequency measured exactly 7.83 Hz. This number is known as the Schumann resonance. It is the natural electromagnetic frequency created by the space between Earth's surface and its ionosphere. Many scientists describe it as the heartbeat of the planet. The surprising part is not that the frequency exists. The surprise is that the silver rain appears to be amplifying it. Shortly after the signal was confirmed, the United States Department of Energy issued a classified alert to major power grid operators along the eastern seaboard. Engineers had begun observing unexplained voltage fluctuations inside large electrical transformers. The conductivity of the rainwater, combined with its magnetic properties, appears to be creating feedback interactions with electrical infrastructure. In simple terms, the surface of the Earth may be acting like a massive antenna. Then, at 10:30 UTC, another unexpected consequence appeared. Internet traffic in London, one of the regions with the heaviest rainfall, suddenly slowed by nearly 40%. Investigators initially suspected a cyber attack. But the cause turned out to be something far stranger. Fiber optic cables buried beneath city streets were experiencing interference caused by the metallic particles embedded in the surrounding soil. The spheres were interacting with the light signals traveling through the cables. To design a material capable of resonating with the exact electromagnetic frequency of a planet requires deep knowledge of that planet's properties. Whoever or whatever created this system understood Earth long before the particles arrived. It is as if the material functions like a tuning fork, adjusting itself to match the natural frequency of our world. Even more unsettling is the pattern scientists noticed in the signal. It is not steady. Every 14 minutes, the resonance spikes dramatically, increasing by nearly 300% before settling again. The rhythm resembles a pulse. When journalists asked the head of the European Space Agency about these readings during a press briefing, he declined to answer and left the room without explanation. Silence from scientists can sometimes speak louder than any statement. At this point, several facts are beyond dispute. A massive quantity of metallic particles has entered Earth's atmosphere. Their composition contains unusual isotopes and mathematically precise ratios. They organize themselves into structured lattices, and now they are generating electromagnetic signals synchronized with our planet's natural frequency. One critical question remains unanswered. What happens when this material enters the biological cycle? Rainwater does not remain on sidewalks forever. It flows into reservoirs, it seeps into groundwater, crops absorb it through their roots. If these particles can assemble themselves on a silicon chip, what might they do inside a living cell? The possibility that scientists are now considering is programmable matter, a system where microscopic components respond to external signals and reorganize themselves. If that is true, then the rain may simply be the delivery system, and Earth may be the destination. Right now, meteorological forecasts show the storm system crossing the Atlantic and moving toward the agricultural heartland of North America. Within hours it could reach the Midwest, the region responsible for feeding a significant portion of the world. If these particles integrate into crops, soil, and water supplies, the consequences could reshape entire ecosystems. Meanwhile, deep space sensors have detected a second pulse emitted from 3I Atlas. It is smaller, faster, and aimed toward the southern hemisphere. Some researchers believe the first wave delivered the physical components. The second may be something else entirely. Perhaps an activation signal. If that interpretation is correct, then the strange silver rain falling on our planet today may not be the end of the story. It may only be the beginning. And if you want to stay informed as scientists uncover what these mysterious particles are really doing on Earth, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the next discovery could change everything we know about our planet and our place in the universe.